Welcome to Crossover Commander, where we show you how to cross over your favorite pop culture characters through the blind eternities so they can command your deck with style. If you really enjoy what you see here today and would like to see this channel grow, check us out on TikTok and Patreon. The links will be in the description section down below. It looks like this portal is stabilizing, so let's get on with this show. After much consideration and some suggestions from fans, I'm going to try out a new, more story-oriented format. Let me know if you like the changes. Every Who down in Whoville loved Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch must find a way to stop his opponents down in Whoville from celebrating their Christmas Day. So he goes into his home and rummages through the trash and finds a mysterious object that leads him to somewhere new. In this new place, he found the power that he looked for and the ability to stop his opponents from celebrating at all. He now knew what he had to do. He must use his newfound power to create a situation where he will win the day. I'd like to present to you Grinch the Magic card. For 1 and a red and a green, you can play him, and for 3 and tap, you can create a mana rock called the Icy Manolith, and for 6, a red and a green, you can look at the top 4 cards of your library and cast a spell from among them without paying its cost, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, to go over the Rule 0 and power level, the Grinch threatens an uncontested win as early as turn 7 and regularly by turn 10 or 12. The strategy to follow to get you there is to focus on the Grinch's ability to ramp and dig through the deck and do everything possible to augment that. To claim victory, once the Grinch has finished his Grinchy plans, i.e. ramping, he rockets down to Whoville to trample all over their celebration and gift his foes with defeat. This is the perfect time to remind you that this is a crossover-themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme will be added regardless of price. Cards that are not essential to fit the theme will be made as budget-friendly as possible. Like all good stories, this deck starts at the beginning. We have a Slagwood Bridge, Tree of Tales, Great Furnace, Dark Steel Citadel, a Command Tower, and 13 snow-covered mountains and 16 snow-covered forests. And then we have some ramp in the form of Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Liquid Metal Torque, and Dark Steel Ingot. The Liquid Metal Torque and the Dark Steel Ingot will come into play a little bit later with some extra functionality. Then we have Hearthstone to reduce the activated ability cost of the Grinch, and Replicating Ring, Blink Moth Urn, and Mana Reflection to take full advantage of our form of ramp and get us way ahead of the rest of the table. So to make sure we can get away with our Grinchy schemes, we've got to be fast and protected. To that end, we run Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, Fervor, and Vandal Blast. The Lightning Greaves and the Swiftfoot Boots will grant us haste, as well as Shroud and Hexproof respectively. Fervor will give the rest of our creatures haste, and Vandal Blast can get rid of any pesky problems on the other side of the table. Then to make sure no creatures get in our way, we play Frenzied Fugue, Mass Mutiny, Song Mad Treachery, and Might Makes Right. Frenzied Fugue and Might Makes Right are repeatable threaten effects to make sure that we can constantly remove threats from our opponent's side of the field. Now that the Grinch has removed obstacles from his path, his plan can really start getting together. We play Mage Right Stone for 2 mana. It taps to untap a target creature. The Seeker of Skybreak and Rime Tender both cost 2 mana and also untap a target creature. And then the 1,000 Year Elixir for 3 allows you to activate abilities as though that creature had haste, and also can untap that target creature. These cards will allow us to take full advantage of the Grinch's abilities. Rings of Bright Hearth for 3 mana says whenever you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 2. If you do, copy that ability. And then Illusionist Bracers for 2 and the equipped cost of 3. It says whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, copy that ability. You may choose new targets for the copy. Then Battle Mage's Bracers for 3 and 2 equip. It says equipped creature has haste, which is also excellent. But whenever an ability of equipped creature is activated, if it isn't a mana ability, you may pay 1 and copy that ability. And then Second Harvest for 2 and 2 green. For each token you control, create a token that's a copy of that permanent, which will allow us to multiply our mana rocks. And then Primal Vigor for 4 and a green. It says if 1 or more tokens will be put onto the battlefield, twice that many of those tokens are put onto the battlefield instead, with the added benefit of doing the same for +1/+1 counters on our creatures. As the Grinch plots and schemes, the Who's down in Whoville celebrate. With Collective Voyage for 1 green, it says join forces. Starting with you, each player may pay any amount of mana. Each player searches his or her library for up to X basic land cards, where X is the total amount of mana paid this way. Put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle. And then Rites of Flourishing for 2 and a green. At the beginning of each player's draw step, that player draws an additional card. For each player may play an additional land each turn. And then Gear for Ori for 4 mana. Each player may play an additional land on each of his or her turns, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, if that player has no cards in hand, they draw 3 cards. And Storm Cauldron for 5 mana. Each player may play an additional land during each of his or her turns. Whenever a land is tapped for mana, return it to its owner's hand. And with Overabundance for 1, a red and a green, whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds 1 additional mana to his or her mana pool of the same type, and it deals 1 damage to them. Heartbeat of Spring for 2 and a green. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, that player adds an additional mana of any type that land produced. And then Zerta Ancient for 3, a red and a green, has the same effect as Heartbeat of Spring. And Dictate of Karametra for 3 and 2 green is an enchantment with flash, and it has the same effect as the Zerta Ancient and the Heartbeat of Spring, adding an additional mana of any type that land can produce. So elated in their celebration, the Who's will not see what's coming next. Cindy Lou Who was correct in spite of being a Who, in that you shouldn't be alone on Christmas. And with that, the Grinch started thinking, I shall get the beasts of the forest and the mountain to help me with my scheme. I will start with Max, or Anora the Wolved Familiar. As long as it's your turn, commanders you control have indestructible. And then Uvenwald Oddity for 2 and 2 green has Trample and Haste and can transform into Uvenwald Oddity, which will give a +1/+1 to all creatures as well as Trample and Haste. And then Sereth the Viper Fang for 2 and 2 green. Other tapped creatures you control have Death Touch, and other untapped creatures you control have Hexproof. And for 1 and tap, you can untap target creature or land you control. And then Karok Wrangler for 4 and a green. It has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, put a 1/1 counter on target creature you control. Atali the Primal Storm for 4 and 2 red. Whenever Atali Primal Storm attacks, exile the top card of each player's library. Then you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana cost. And then we have Aggressive Mammoth for 3 and 3 green. It has Trample and gives all your other creatures Trample. Giant Ataphage for 5 and 2 green has Trample, and whenever Giant Ataphage deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of Giant Ataphage. And then Tectonic Hellion for 5 and 2 red. It has haste, and whenever Tectonic Hellion attacks, each player who controls the most lands sacrifices 2 lands. And then the Patron of Orochi for 6 and 2 green has Snake Offering, which we will not take advantage of in this deck, but it has tap to untap all forests and all green creatures that play this ability only once each turn. And then Avatar of Slaughter for 6 and 2 red. All creatures have double strike and attack each turn if able. Then the Archetype of Endurance has for 6 and 2 green. Creatures you control have hexproof, and creatures your opponents control lose hexproof and can't have or gain hexproof. And then we have Liege of the Tangle for 6 and 2 green. It has Trample, and whenever Liege of the Tangle deals combat damage to a player, you may choose any number of target lands you control and put an Awakening counter on each of them. Each of those lands are an 8/8 green elemental creature for as long as it has an Awakening counter on it, and they're still lands. To top off the high end of our Beasts of Burden, we have Terrastodon for 6 and 2 green. When Terrastodon enters the battlefield, you may destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents for each permanent put into a graveyard this way. Its controller creates a 3/3 green elephant creature token. And then the Tarrasque for 6 and 3 green. The Tarrasque has haste and ward 10 as long as it was cast, which it will be from the Grinch's ability. And whenever the Tarrasque attacks, it fights target creature defending player controls. And then Apex Devastator for 8 and 2 green has Cascade, 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 which will allow us to cast an additional 4 cards when this creature comes onto the battlefield. And then World Spine Worm for 8 and 3 green. It has Trample. And when World Spine Worm dies, put 3 5/5 green worm creature tokens with Trample onto the battlefield. And when World Spine Worm is put into a graveyard from anywhere, shuffle it into its owner's library. If our cacophonous cavalcade of creatures can't cancel Christmas celebrations, this combo certainly will. You play the Stormkiln Artist for 3 and a red. It has Magecraft. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, create a treasure token. Then you have something indestructible like Darksteel Forge works great. And then you cast Chain of Acid. It says for 3 and a green, destroy target non-creature permanent, then that permanent's controller may copy this spell and may choose a new target for the copy. This will create infinite sorcery spells activating, which will give us infinite treasure tokens. And then we use that infinite mana to tap and untap the Grinch infinite times to play our entire deck using the Staff of Domination. Or we can ruin Christmas with Disrupt Decorum for 2 and a red. We goad all creatures we don't control. And Dictate of the Twin Gods for 3 and 2 red. It has Flash, and if a source would deal damage to a permanent or player, it deals double that damage instead. And Mob Rule for 4 and 2 red allows us to choose one, gain control of all creatures with power 4 or greater until end of turn, untapping them and giving them haste, or gaining control of all creatures with power 3 or less, and untapping them and giving them haste. Or we can just steal all of the creatures for 5 and 3 red with Insurrection, untapping all creatures and gaining control of them until end of turn. They gain haste. If we are feeling particularly mean, we can ruin their homes as we ruin their holiday as well. With Impending Disaster for 1 and a red, it says during your upkeep, if there are 7 or more lands in play, sacrifice Impending Disaster and destroy all lands. From the Ashes for 3 and a red, destroys all non-basic lands. For each land destroyed this way, its controller may search his or her library for a basic land and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. And then Boom and Bust will be casting the bust part for 5 and a red, destroy all lands. And then Obliterate for 6 and 2 red. Obliterate can't be countered, destroy all artifact, creature, and land cards. They can't be regenerated. This won't be so much of a problem for us, considering all of our mana is going to be coming from our artifacts, and we have ways to make them indestructible. And in true Grinch fashion, the best way to end this deck is for our heart to grow 3 sizes. To do this, we will play Colossification. For 5 and 2 green, it says Enchant Creature. When Colossification enters the battlefield, tap Enchanted Creature, but Enchanted Creature gains +20/+20. Now we use one of our other untappers to make sure he gets back untapped. And then we equip the Dark Steel Plate, or as I like to call it, the Grinch's Ugly Christmas Sweater. For 3, it has Indestructible, and equipped creature has Indestructible, and the equip cost is 2. And then we cast Seize the Day. For 3 and a red, untap the Grinch. After this main phase, there is an additional combat phase, followed by an additional main phase in which we would flash this card back to cast it again. And then Chroma's Memorial. For 7, creatures you control have flying, first strike, vigilant, trample, and haste, and protection from black and red, allowing us to get over most decks if there are still creatures left on the board, to end this in one immensely satisfying one-turn commander kill on the entire table. Now that we've looked through all the cards in the Grinch's deck, let's check out the average price. At time of release, it's between $198 and $260, depending on where you purchase from. As always, it can be cheaper if you don't mind playing with heavily played or damaged cards. Then to look at the stats for the deck, we've got 17 ramp cards, including the Grinch. He will help us ramp out a lot. And then for tutors, we have 0, but we don't really need them, considering the Grinch's ability will dig us through our deck plenty. That same philosophy goes for our card draw. We only run 3 other than the Grinch. And then for our interaction, we run 8 different types of interaction. And then for board wipes, we run 6, including effects like Insurrection and Obliterate. And then for our lands, we have 34, plus the additional land that Songmad Treachery will give us if we choose to play it as a land. Remember, this is a crossover themed build. With that being said, crucial cards for the theme were added regardless of price. Cards that were not essential to fit the theme were made as budget-friendly as possible. If you want to optimize this list, feel free to leave your upgrades in the comments section below. Most importantly, this deck is meant to be a new and engaging way to spice up your Commander games, so fun is the top priority. Thank you for watching this crossover deck tech. If you liked this video, check out our other content on YouTube or TikTok. Your viewership means the multiverse to the crossover commander, and if you would like to become a part of this growing Terran reality, you can like, share, and subscribe. If you would like to vote on the next pop culture character to crossover, check out our Patreon where we have some awesome perks. If you have any ideas or complaints, feel free to leave them in the comments section below. Now that this portal's closing, see you next time.